Hey guys, today I'm going to read A Man of No Words by u/IC Opportunity 9. This is a part of a bigger series called the Yogurt Extended Universe, so hope you enjoy. Friday today, Great Uncle Arthur showed up at our front door for no apparent reason. He didn't even knock or ring the doorbell, so I only found him when I was about to head Rowley's to play video games. Poppied. I wasn't quite sure what to do, so I called Dad over. Believe me, he wasn't that happy to see his weird uncle randomly appear in front of his house. "What are you even doing here, Uncle Arthur?" Sadly, Mom overheard him and gave him a lecture about how families have to stick together and that. So it looks like Great Uncle Arthur's spending the weekend with us. Having Great Uncle Arthur over really sucks because once Mom let him in the house, he plopped down on the recliner in front of the TV and sat there for the rest of the day. This made playing Twisted Wizard, Retribution extremely awkward for me. Europe, do you mind? Then there's the fact that whenever someone stays at our house, they always stay in my room and I'm forced to sleep on an air mattress in Roderick's room. If that isn't torture, I don't know what is. Saturday, when I got up this morning, I discovered that someone had left an extremely cryptic message on the kitchen table. I don't know who wrote it, but the way it was written makes me think it was Great Uncle Arthur. I don't know what that's supposed to say, but I'm pretty sure Great Uncle Arthur is trying to tell us something. Or is he? Eventually, I started to wonder if Roderick made this note to fool me, so I showed it to him. "You're not gonna fool me by scribbling on a piece of paper." In order to prove Roderick wrong, I got him to spy on Great Uncle Arthur with me. We sat there for half an hour and Great Uncle Arthur didn't move a muscle. Even I was starting to think that this was all some practical joke, until he picked up a pencil. I don't think either of us would have expected that. I mean, who would have thought Great Uncle Arthur knew how pencils worked? The resulting message was just as cryptic as the first one. Sadly, Great Uncle Arthur's writing is horrible, so I don't know what he's trying to say here. What I do know though, is that Great Uncle Arthur is Dad's uncle, so Dad probably knows something about him. I asked Dad about Great Uncle Arthur, but he wasn't much help. I only saw him about 2 or 3 times a year, so we weren't that close. From what I heard, when Dad was a kid, he only saw Great Uncle Arthur around the holidays, which explains why he knows so little about him. The only interesting thing I did learn was that Great Uncle Arthur once had the ability to speak. So I guess he went crazy at some point in his life. I kept an eye on Great Uncle Arthur for the rest of the day, but he just sat in the recliner and watched TV. It wasn't until night fell that I remembered something that could help us decipher what he was saying. After Mom and Dad went to bed, I managed to convince Roderick to watch that movie about the kids who made up their own secret language with me. Beagle Boogle Scraye. I can't quite remember why I thought that movie was so great when I was in 6th grade, because it was pretty lame. The special effects were cheesy and all the jokes seemed to involve butts or farts. On the other hand, those kids' secret language seemed very similar to the random noises that Great Uncle Arthur made. I know it's fairly unlikely for an old man to be inspired by a kids' movie that only came out 3 years ago, but who knows where the kids' language came from. Sunday, when I woke up, I discovered that Great Uncle Arthur was gone. The only thing he left behind was another cryptic message. I told Dad about this, but he just assumed that Great Uncle Arthur had gone out and would eventually return, but Great Uncle Arthur didn't return for rest of the day. He didn't even stand still in front of the door like he always did. In the evening, Dad received a mysterious phone call. "Hello? Is Arthur Heffley here? He just left this morning." "Why?" "Let me tell you this, Arthur Heffley is evil. He wants nothing more than hello. Hello. Anybody there? Hello." Mom always keeps the speakerphone on for safety reasons, so I was able to hear what the guy on the other side of the line was saying. Sadly, our phone hasn't got caller ID, so I don't know who phoned us. Though the whole idea of Great Uncle Arthur being evil is kind of extreme to say the least. I mean, he is very strange, but he's mostly harmless from what I've seen. Mom ended up letting me have my room back after Great Uncle Arthur failed to show up tonight. I was excited I got spared from sleeping with Roderick for one more night, but my excitement quickly faded when I saw what Great Uncle Arthur did to my room. I guess it's hardly surprising that Great Uncle Arthur's a slob, because my room was trashed. I don't know what Great Uncle Arthur did in my room, but the bed sheets smelled like Uncle Gary after he found Dad's hidden beer stash. Apart from that, Great Uncle Arthur went through all my stuff and managed to ruin some of it. He even wrecked my framed photo of Holly Hills, which I spent half of my birthday money on. The only reason I hadn't brought it down to Roderick's room for protection was because I knew he'd never let me live it down. Sure, it was just a picture I scanned from a yearbook, but I was still pretty upset about it. Speaking of yearbooks, Great Uncle Arthur found and vandalized my latest one. As I flipped through the yearbook, I began to notice that Great Uncle Arthur only seemed to have circled girls. More specifically, he only circled all the girls that I was interested in at some point. This can only mean that he either likes the same kinds of girls that I do or that he can read my mind. Though why an old man is looking at pictures of middle school girls is questionable. Monday I was half expecting Great Uncle Arthur to turn up on doorstep, but he didn't. Instead, I got a totally different kind of surprise when I saw today's paper the Daily Herald. Joshi under fire for violent lyrics. He was big, hairy, and he was watching me sleep. A girl recounts her terrifying encounter with a stalker. What would be a fairly normal Sunday night sleep for 14-year-old Bailey Anthony ended up turning into a nightmare, when an obese, hairy man reportedly managed to sneak into her bedroom. How the man snuck in remains unknown, as is how long he remained there, though Anthony claims that he might have been there for hours before she noticed him. While the man remains at large, he could be potentially facing numerous charges. Continued on A7. Well, that's got to be one of the strangest things I've ever read. I mean, the whole idea of someone stalking a girl in my class is just odd. I thought of doing some more research on Bailey's case, but Roderick suggested that we go to Leisure Towers and ask Grandpa what he knew about Great Uncle Arthur. I was surprised that he was suddenly interested in uncovering the mystery, though I soon discovered why. We got there around lunch and Grandpa had prepared a bowl of watercress salad, which he forced us to eat. And as it turned out, listening to his stories about Great Uncle Arthur and stomaching the watercress salad proved to be a lot harder than I expected. For some reason, all of Grandpa's stories seemed to depict Great Uncle Arthur as some super buff jock, which seems weird given how fat he currently is. Either that or I was focusing too much on the watercress salad and not enough on Grandpa. After eating way too much watercress salad, we went home and I decided to look up that movie to see if the kid's secret language was based on anything. Eventually, I found an interview with the director where he revealed the whole truth. What does the kid's language mean? If I told you, that'd be like KFC revealing what's in their chicken. So I guess the kid's language is just a load of gibberish after all. Come to think of it, who knows if Great Uncle Arthur's random noises mean anything at all? And if not, who knows what he's even thinking? Yesterday, I finally finished cleaning my room and I discovered that my list of every single girl in my grade ranked in order of prettiness was missing. Sure, I made it 2 years ago so it's a bit out of date, but I especially didn't want it to fall into the wrong hands. I don't know when it disappeared, but I remember seeing it in my room, the day before Great Uncle Arthur arrived. This could only mean that he took it, though I have no idea why he'd want such a list. In other news, I thought Bailey getting stalked was a one-off incident, but as it turns out, it wasn't. Mysterious Plainview stalker strikes again. Many would have believed that Sunday's staling incident wouldn't be repeated, given its extensive coverage in the Daily Herald. Sadly, it proved to just be the first in what appears to be a series, with Alv Segrove, a close friend of Bailey Anthony, reporting that she had been stalked by a man matching the description given to the Daily Herald by Anthony. While we don't know if this is continued on A5, Sandy caught shoplifting on parole. Repeat offender criminal Albert Sandy was recently allowed on parole after reportedly displaying good behavior in prison for the past month. Sadly, this all seems to have been a big ruse, as Sandy used his parole as an opportunity to steal 30 cans of yogurt from a local Walmart before being caught by police and escorted back to prison. Continued on A3, the whole stalking business made me wonder if this was all linked to some unpopular student who had a crush on those girls but got turned down. I mean, Bailey and Alyssa are two of the most popular girls in my grade, so this seems pretty likely. The only problem is finding out who did it. There were tons of outcasts at school, so who knows which one of them is the culprit. Come to think of it, I'm not even sure if I can remember all of them. And even so, there were probably a few more that I never knew existed. Eventually I gave up on trying to make a list of potential culprits and noticed a piece of paper sticking out from behind my desk. I pulled it out, only to discover that it was my list. Well, half of it, anyways. Unfortunately, it turned out to be the second half, where I stuck all the undesirables like Patty Farrell, Ruby Bird, and a whole bunch of other girls I didn't like. I looked all over my room, but failed to find the first part anywhere. I guess this could only mean that Great Uncle Arthur has the first half of the list. I wasn't sure why he'd steal like that, until I remembered that I'd given Bailey Alyssa the top 2 spots on my list and they'd already been stalked. I don't know if the list has anything to do with the stalking, but if so, then the third prettiest girl on the list is next. And then I remembered that the third prettiest girl on the list was Mackenzie Pollard, but she moved away at the end of last year. This means that the girl to be stalked is the fourth prettiest, which means Great Uncle Arthur is coming for Holly. Of course I'm not gonna let that happen, but I don't think I can beat Great Uncle Arthur alone. So I asked Roderick if he'd help me. Roderick, I'm going to need your help tonight. Well, tough luck, I'm not helping you sneak around. You sure about that? I'm going to Holly Hills. Of course. Wait, is she related to Heather Hills? And with that, Roderick was on board with my plan. So after Mom and Dad went to bed, we got in the van and rolled out into the night. I wasn't sure where Great Uncle Arthur would hide, and frankly, there's not a lot of places where he could hide, given how fat he is. Then I noticed a ladder propped up on the side of the Hills house. Roderick sent me up first. I don't know if he was trying to stay safe or use me as bait, but since this was Holly's house, I went in anyways. I didn't know what to expect from Holly's room, and I was pretty surprised when I found out what was going on. Great Uncle Arthur was standing beside Holly's bed, filming her while she slept. I wasn't able to see much due to how huge he is, but that's got to be the most messed up thing I've ever seen. I prayed that Great Uncle Arthur wouldn't notice me, but unfortunately for me, he did. Yerp. At this point, I knew I was screwed. Me and Great Uncle Arthur stared at each other for a moment. And then he charged at me, which left me with no choice but to brace myself. Bray-a-a-ah. Shakalaba. Fortunately, Great Uncle Arthur's not very smart, and he ended up running into the wall and falling over. I was debating over whether or not I should hit him with a mallet when Roderick barged in with a wooden plank. I'm not entirely sure what Roderick's plan was, but he must have hit Great Uncle Arthur something like 20 times before the lights came on. Mr. and Mrs. Hills must have gone somewhere and left Heather in charge of the house. And this meant that she could kick us out of the house whenever she felt like doing. Listen, I can explain all of this. Get out now. Heather, just give him a chance. In the end, Heather won out and we were forced to drag Great Uncle Arthur's body out of the house. We weren't sure if he was dead or not, so we ended up tying him up and hiding him in the woods behind our house. I know that wasn't the best idea, but we were so tired that we just wanted to get rid of him. Wednesday this morning, I went to move Great Uncle Arthur to a different place, only to discover that his body was gone. Since we tied him up, this could only mean that someone else took him. Given his bizarre language, I'm pretty sure it was either the Mingos or Fregley who found him. I told Roderick about the Mingos, and for some reason, he seemed very interested in them. In fact, he even offered to give me a ride there, as well as a free disguise. Still, I only accepted his offer because I didn't know what the disguise was. For some reason, Roderick thought my old tree costume from that Wizard of Oz play I did in grade 6 would work as a disguise. Don't ask me how he came up with that. Unfortunately, Roderick didn't have anything else that could double as a disguise, so I was forced to wear the tree costume and hope the Mingos wouldn't recognize me. Intruder. Intruder. Sadly, the Mingos did recognize me and I was forced to make a run for it. To make matters worse, Roderick totally misunderstood my request for him to bring something to shoot the Mingos with if they started chasing me. At least Roderick didn't drive off on me like I thought he would. He still forced me into the back of the van since the tree costume was so bulky, and then raced like a maniac while I was trying to take it off. By this point I was starting to get fed up with Roderick, and I made him drop me off a few blocks away from our house. I then walked to Rowley's to see if he wanted to help me, only to discover that him and his parents had gone somewhere without telling me. And with that, I reluctantly set off for Fregley's house, hoping that I'd find Great Uncle Arthur there. When I got to Fregley's house, he was standing in his front yard like he always does. "Wanna see my scab collection? Can we make this as quick as possible?" Fregley seemed to have taken that as a yes. And I was forced to look at hundreds of scabs in various states of decay. After half an hour, I felt like I was gonna throw up if I had to look at any more scabs, so I bailed out. After that, I needed some eye bleach, so I went down to Holly's to explain what had happened last night. Holly was actually pretty cool about the whole Great Uncle Arthur thing, since technically I was just trying to help her. We ended up having a pretty lengthy discussion on who had the weirdest relative. At least until Heather showed up. "What the hell are you doing here again? He has a name, Heather." And then I thought of a good answer. "I bet the fat guy from last night would love to stalk a girl like you, Heather." I thought this was enough to make Heather leave, but instead she told me that I had 10 seconds to get out before I got dealt with. I didn't want to find out what Heather had in store for me, so I left as quickly as possible. I mean, she doesn't think very highly of Roderick, so I doubt she'll go easy on me. I hope Holly tells all the other girls about Great Uncle Arthur, because I still don't know where he is. He wasn't in the Mingos woods or in Fregley's house, and I'm not sure when or where he's gonna pop up next. So I just went home, only to find Dad talking to Byron. "And he just walked out on you?" "Pretty well. We haven't seen him since Saturday." It took me about 10 seconds to realize that they were talking about Great Uncle Arthur, so I told them what I knew about him. "I know what Great Uncle Arthur's been doing. He's been filming girls while they sleep." Byron then said he had something to tell me. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but it turned out to be the entire story of how Great Uncle Arthur came to be who he currently is. There was a time when Great Uncle Arthur was an elite athlete who dated the high school prom queen. A few years later, they settled down and I was born. Everything was alright from then on, until my mother died. I was about 12 and Great Uncle Arthur was never the same from after that. He started drinking excessively, sometimes up to 6 bottles a day. He would also bring home random women, and I swear I never saw the same one more than twice. I am pretty sure it was that combination of alcohol and hookers that caused him to lose his mind. He was approaching midlife and had barely any idea who he was and who he wanted to be. He stopped exercising and started doing things without knowing why he was doing them. I remember hearing him muttering, "Why are we here? What, in fact, is the point of all this?" Whenever he wasn't drinking. By the time I left for college, he'd begun to descend into utter madness. Our house was a total mess thanks to the unholy amount of junk had accumulated, and he only left the house to go to family gatherings or to buy more liquor. When I moved out for good, he'd gone totally insane. Unable to speak or work, he spent his days drinking and scaring people. And that's all he's been doing for the past decade. Maybe he longs to be useful and relive his past again, who knows. All I know is that he's probably too far gone to be worth saving. And I think the stalking incidents just prove my point. Apart from telling me who Great Uncle Arthur once was, Byron also deciphered the cryptic notes. As it turns out, Great Uncle Arthur was trying to tell us that he planned on stalking girls, that he stole half my list, and that he didn't want us to call the cops on him. I'm not sure why he told us that, but I guess that's what happens when you're that crazy. Later this evening, Byron said that he, Dad and Roderick were gonna go put an end to Great Uncle Arthur's illegal activities. While I wasn't part of the original plan, I suggested that I should go since I knew the most about what Great Uncle Arthur was up to. We ended up going to the hills since I thought that Great Uncle Arthur would return there after me and Roderick destroyed his footage of Holly sleeping. Once we got there, Byron made me and Roderick make sure no one was watching us while they went to look for Great Uncle Arthur. As it turns out, someone was watching us. P-Mud. After the P-Mud joke caught fire, I don't think a single girl in our school wanted to be caught dead dating Preston Mudd, so I guess that's why he was there. If you want to know how popular P-Mud got, some kid from my school uploaded Preston's Athlete of the Month onto the internet and it's now all over there too. Now everyone knows who Preston is, and I can kind of understand why I haven't seen him at school lately. Anyways, Preston got really mad at Roderick for calling him P-Mud and tried to attack him. But I think Preston gave up on exercising after he got voted Athlete of the Month, and he was pretty easy to defeat. After we took care of Preston, we to find Byron and Dad. Sadly, there was a problem. Somebody stop him. As it turns out, Great Uncle Arthur was already in the Hills house chasing Holly around, while Dad and Byron were trying, and failing, to catch him. Shaami and Roderick joined in the case, but we couldn't catch Great Uncle Arthur despite him not having exercised in at least 20 years. In fact, we couldn't stop him until Mr. Hills took care of him. I guess that Mr. and Mrs. Hills came back from their romantic getaway, because Mr. Hills stopped Great Uncle Arthur in one hit. While we were happy that Mr. Hills caught Great Uncle Arthur, he wanted to know what we were doing in his house in the middle of the night. Luckily, Dad was able to come up with a backstory. We were chasing a guy who escaped from an insane asylum. He wasn't supposed to be released for another 20 years, and what is the meaning of all this, Mr. Heffley? I'm not sure if Mr. Hills believed Dad, but he ended up sending all of us out anyways. I swear I saw Holly give me a look of gratitude though, which did cheer me up. Thursday, good thing Mr. Hills didn't call the cops on us. He does seem to have reported Preston though, since he was on the front page of today's newspaper. The Daily Herald Plainview stalker revealed as internet sensation Preston Mudd. Former all-star basketball player Preston Mudd, best known for his role as the popular internet P-Mud meme, has been outed as the stalker terrorizing the teenage girls of Plainview. This is completely unacceptable, states longtime resident Jonathan Hills, 46, who on earth taught this boy to treat girls this way. Hills actually caught Mudd stalking his 14-year-old daughter Holly, who is reported to have been traumatized by the incident. Mudd himself is currently in police custody and was unavailable for comment, but his actions may be due to his internet fame. Joshi opens up about criticism. Popular European singer Joshi has responded to numerous complaints from Soccer Moms of America. Byron left some time earlier today, leaving behind a note stating that his work here was done. I guess he only came here to take down Great Uncle Arthur. Anyways, Dad told me that we were going out and I wasn't quite sure what he meant until I saw him loading up the car. I guess Great Uncle Arthur could only take so many hits and Dad was trying to dispose of the evidence. I wasn't so sure if this was a good idea, but since I also got involved in the whole Great Uncle Arthur thing, I went with him. We ended up burying Great Uncle Arthur in the woods. I'm not sure if this was the best place for him, but I just hope no one ever finds him. We spent several hours digging and burying Great Uncle Arthur. Surprisingly enough, no one found us until we laid the last patch of dirt on his grave. Hi, Greg. I wasn't expecting Holly to find us here, until I realized that Dad had taken me to the woods right behind the Hills house. I don't know if he's been reading my journals, but it sure seems like he has. I asked Holly about what she did last night after we left, and as it turns out, the end of Great Uncle Arthur still remains a secret between us. My dad ended up killing your great uncle. I know that wasn't the best thing to do, but he was just trying to protect me. After you took his body away, we blamed Preston Mudd for the stalking and got him arrested. Sure, it wasn't entirely his fault, but we didn't want to ruin your night. As it turns out, Preston Mudd had hired Great Uncle Arthur to film all those girls sleeping. I guess he knew he'd never get a girlfriend due to everyone knowing him as P. Mudd. As for Great Uncle Arthur, I'm okay with what happened to him. I don't think anyone really has that much of a sentimental attachment to him, and as Byron said, he was too far gone to be worth saving. As I reflected on everything that happened in the past week, I felt Holly tug on my hand. And suddenly, it didn't matter that we were standing in front of a freshly dug grave or that Dad was watching us. I guess Great Uncle Arthur did do something right on his last visit.